Welcome back to the Genesis podcast. We have finally settled on that name. Hope you like it. I love it. I'm Zach Pitts.
I'm Bulent. Welcome.
Yeah, and it's great to have you back here. So last time on the podcast, we really just talked about not only what lights you up as an entrepreneur and what sets you on this journey. We really kind of paved the foundation for where you want to go with this podcast. And I think that's why you were so focused on the name Genesis, because, as I've learned, it's really part of the building block. Everything stacks on top of that.
Yeah. So a short story about the word Genesis is that a blockchain is a chain of blocks, as it says. So one block it is based, the information of that block or correctness of that block is based on the previous block, and that's information is based on the previous block. But there's a block where everything starts, which does not depend on anything, and that block is called Genesis block, basically. So basically, like, we're giving the information to people where, for someone who just wants to learn about blockchain or where they can start, and then where they can start building applications in blockchain space, we're gonna target this place to be the right place.
Okay, and so the one thing that we're going to be talking about today, Ethereum, which I admitted to you when we first had this conversation of, hey, let's put together a podcast and it's going to be all about blockchain technology. You started throwing out this word Ethereum, and I was like, okay, well, that's just a coin. I remember I had this Coinbase app, and I remember that was one of those things that I bought not knowing what I had purchased. But you were like, no, Ethereum is much more. It's not just this little coin. It's everything.
Yeah. Ethereum is basically the story of that, a little going back to probably 2014, 15, where people were building, there was Bitcoin and projects that were similar to Bitcoin. And people were building applications that used Bitcoin-like tokens to build it for a specific use case. One of them was like naming service. Like, when you buy a domain name, it belongs to you. So the idea was that you use some Bitcoin and purchase a domain name or a name, and then that belongs to you and written on the blockchain ledger, and everyone knows that it's yours. So then there was another application, and people were building like a new blockchain for every application. And then Vitalik and two other guys, when they started, they were like, hey, we should just have this generic platform or blockchain that anyone can build any kind of application. But what did that look like? What would that look like? So they articulated and then came up with the smart contract language, basically a programming language where anyone can write and describe their application in this language, and then the application will live on blockchain and be executed on blockchain. And anyone who uses that blockchain or has any kind of Ethereum token, they can participate and using that blockchain application. And not only that, that application can communicate with another application within the same blockchain. So that was the idea, and then it kind of just from there it just blew up. Basically, Ethereum became the norm for blockchain applications. But it hit a point where it's kind of limiting at this point, but it served its purpose. It's still serving its purpose pretty well.
The one analogy that you gave a few episodes ago, and it's what's really kind of helped me wrap my mind around this concept. You had talked about Apple, for example.
Yeah.
Or, they build this program, they build the platform where other people can come in to create. It's still on their network, if you will. It's still on their platform, but people can come in and add their creativity to it and design what they want given that application.
Yeah, and that analogy is very good. Like, people build applications. When Apple first started the platform app without the App Store, it was just them building the application one by one. But when they opened it up, now there are hundreds of millions of applications, and everyone. Even that analogy is kind of limiting for blockchain applications, because the blockchain applications has a lot more access than just the application itself. One big advantage is these applications being able to call each other and taking advantage of that. There are other types of things you can build, but at a high level, like seeing it that way, like, hey, anyone can build applications, anyone can monetize from their applications. is a good fitting up analogy for Ethereum and similar like blockchains.
Now let's go ahead and talk a little deeper into just the use cases of Ethereum. And you had mentioned before we went on this podcast today, there were some things you really wanted to touch on that you felt were really just the pillars of what people need to know as it relates to Ethereum and moving forward with it.
Yeah. So there are there's a lot of applications but you kind of see these concentration of applications for like different categories of categories of benefits, I would say. Some of them you've probably heard, NFTs. NFT, people say NFT. For instance, when I tell them there's FTs, and they're like, what is FT? People know NFT only. And FT, it started with FT. FT is the Ethereum itself, like fungible token. So a fungible token is basically a token that can be split. Like let's say I give you $5, you can distribute that to $2 and $3, and you can split that. But a picture, let's say you have the picture of Mona Lisa, you can't cut it in half and then distribute it in half and half.
It's funny that you use that.
That's an NFT basically.
You use that example. That was like literally what I was just going to say. and I find a lot of people do that too. And I want to get back to what you were saying, because it's like owning like a piece of that art.
Yeah.
And yeah, so this is going to get really interesting real quick. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but but that makes sense to me. That makes sense. And I hope people that are watching or listening are following along, because I think that you're really going to break this down right now. Yeah. It's going to click.
Yeah. It's going to, because when you talk about the beginnings of these things, you kind of understand, oh, that's where it's coming from. That makes sense. So FT, fungible token, is basically Bitcoin, US dollar representation as a stable coin. Ethereum's token itself, moved token, what we're going to probably come up with. These are all like fungible, meaning like you can split them, give half of it to someone, other half to someone else, or just keep it to yourself. So non-fungible is basically you can't split in multiple pieces. So that means like the ownership is on you and you only. And like a painting, you own the painting. You can't cut a piece of it and then give it to someone. The value doesn't. The value goes to zero that way, actually. So you can't do that. So NFT represents that. But NFT, it is used for, like, imagine something like that's only owned by you. What are the things that in real life that is just owned by you? Like when you buy a ticket, event ticket, like concert ticket, you just own that ticket. You're not, basically that gives you the ownership to attend that ticket or to attend that event. So NFTs are kind of use cases are for like membership stuff. Like a ticket is a very good example where you can kind of sign up and get that seat for that day, and that's owned by you. But normally, like if you want to distribute that to sell it to someone else, you have to kind of meet that person somewhere to give that physical ticket. But how can we digitally represent that ticket? There are a few ticketing companies that move that to the NFT space, where you can kind of, if you just want to sell it, you can sell that NFTs to someone else. And this way, not only like you can make money, but the distribution, like the event venue, can make money, a commission off of the sales too, if they built it that way. So the ticketing application on blockchain can be built in a way that will benefit the event owner and also the seller and the distributor, everyone basically, if it's built that way. They don't have to build it that way. But in like a physical world, the ticket is yours, and the event venue cannot earn anything from you selling it, basically. So there's like moving it to digital world helps with that. So that's one example, and then it's used for gaming. Let's say you have a gaming character and you level up. How do you represent that? How do you, like, some people want to sell that character, want to earn money from that, and how do you represent that and then prove that you own that, and no one else, they cannot be duplicated by the game developers. So that's NFTs like used for that too. And with these are like, they call them, these kind of NFTs, a little more dynamic NFTs, where you can add additional things, attach things like the clothes and like pendants and things like that, have more experience points. So these are NFTs are like kind of a dynamic representation of the NFT. And this industry, this application space is changing and improving. So we're going to see different kind of NFTs in the future. That's just one example. The other one, that comes to my mind, big one actually, is DeFi, decentralized finance. So centralized finance is basically, it represents the banks and loans getting from banks. How can we represent the same thing on the digital world, on blockchain, where anyone can participate, anyone can take any kind of loan, and then have yields, and then come back and pay, and things like that. So there are quite a few applications. They're highly used applications. The problem usually happens in the space is there's a lot of transactions, but Ethereum kind of struggles with those transactions, because Ethereum, when you send a transaction, Ethereum also charges a fee to use it, to use the application within itself. So that becomes a little complex there. But ignoring that, these projects are, there's a lot of advancement in these projects. And then you got the category of social fi, they call it. There's influencers earning money from their product advertisement and things like that, where anytime someone posts and engages in the conversation, they get to earn some tokens. And those tokens in the small tokens don't make much, but don't value much. But if you accumulate a lot for a big influencer, that could be worth quite a bit of money. And then this space is kind of growing right now, being explored. So there's not many things known yet. So people are exploring different ways, and some of them might become successful. And then there's the tokenization, which is bringing how do people are considering how to bring the commodities oil. They're being on the way being shipped, and there's no one can buy or sell that during that shipment. Let's say logs from a forest and being sent for a whole month, and you just sell it in the beginning and then sell it at the end. During that time frame, no one can buy and sell. So people are bringing these to a digital world where people can own and buy a piece of it and then sell it online, and things like that, kind of bringing it to a more digitized world. And this is called a real world assets or tokenization. Gold is an example. Carbon incentives, how do you purchase carbon incentives? So people are bringing that to blockchain. So yeah, there are more, but there's a lot of applications basically that are very useful.
The one thing that really strikes me about you is this desire to make what could be a very complicated thing to understand for most people, for a majority of just people in this country, all around the world.
Yeah.
Why is it important for you to make sure that you boil down these concepts into a very bite-sized, easy to understand way, so people can wrap their heads around this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so I find it fascinating where kind of people are moving together along, and even team building activities. I make sure everyone is on the same page, because you lose people on the way, and it's just for technology that's just doesn't feel right and good to me. In a way that there's an advancement in somewhere, but the rest of the people are not know anything about it. That just doesn't feel right. For blockchain, it's been happening a lot, especially when you go to a website. It's just a lot of times it's kind of scary. You go, it's this space stuff, and okay, I'm not in space. So people that turn it off and just close it. It's not approachable as much, but it's changing. The narrative is changing. Blockchain is becoming more approachable. Blockchain projects are becoming more approachable to people, and I think if you want to move the masses together, you gotta get to their level and then talk for everyone, and then everyone should be able to understand, so that people can relate and make the right use for themselves. I'm not forcing anyone to use it or anything. It's just understand it well, and then you can make the right uses for yourself.
And that was the whole idea of the Genesis podcast, is to boil down these concepts so people can understand what's happening now, where things are going, what you need to prepare for as the world shifts into more of a blockchain reality, if you will, because it's going to be so prevalent in society.
Yeah, and even when we talk about the new concepts, new updates and Ethereum, new changes, and I'd like to bring in some guests that talk about very specific applications in blockchain. And we will still like, even if it's a new update, new change, we will still like boil it down to the basics and explain the basics and make sure like it makes sense to most people basically. So I have a little bit of passion, I guess, to boil things down into like components.
I think you have a lot of passion. I mean, obviously, the last time we spoke, you talked about several stories where so you're a passionate person to where you want to make sure that other people succeed. I mean, you talked about a couple different stories, but just on this topic as well, because if you're not in the know, you get left behind. It's going to be really difficult. It's going to be a struggle. And so you have that desire to make sure that nobody gets left behind because this is where we're going. And you've invested a lot of time, money, resources into learning about this technology.
Yeah, I really respect the first principles approach. That's kind of been, when I heard about it, I'm like, oh, that's how I think too. Like boil it down to like the basics of like when you make a decision, like let's just bring it down to the basics. And then if it makes sense or not, basically decide based on that. I also like to get a lot of people's opinion at the same time to hear different aspects of things. Like when we build this, like when we're building our blockchain, we're looking into the application space of tokenization, like real world assets. So we're having some interaction with like these builders. And I thought that if you have a KYC product, like KYC stands for Know Your Customer, basically ID checking, and a few other things, then you're good to go. But you talk to them, they tell you every little detail. And I learned about the logs, like being shipped. I had no idea that's what it was for, and then being able to sell that along the way, that kind of stuff. You talk to these people and kind of bring them on board, and in order to really make a change, I feel like you should understand the details, like the basics, and then start from there, basically.
And that's the whole mission again, a move to making sure that you guys are moving people along, educating them along the way as you're helping to build the product and promote the product, making sure that the customer and all those that are going to be utilizing it are educated along the way. What is the best way that people can stay educated with what you're doing right now, aside from the Genesis podcast, so they aren't left behind and they can continue moving forward with this technology?
Yeah, very good question. I actually, we have an engineer / designer. We're working together on having this developer advocacy program where we're going to share some tutorials on how to build in our blockchain, and like from scratch, basically. Let's say you want to build a website that utilizes this. We're going to kind of have these tutorials, and so we're working on these. By the time probably this podcast launches, it will be available. So it will be on our website, moved.network, and so we should be able to like educate our builders and show them how to take advantage of our blockchain by using this very secure smart contract language, and still be on the Ethereum ecosystem, which is the biggest ecosystem, blockchain ecosystem by far compared to the rest. And so our goal is to kind of bring these best of the world, like most secure smart contract language, and then bring the most viable blockchain, bring it together, and then provide it to our developers. And yeah, we would love to like also for like builders, we would love to have. We're opening a Discord channel soon to be able to participate in the conversation, to learn from them, and to be able to like build stuff that benefits them the most. So we're kind of opening our channels to the public to like be able to have this conversations going.
A lot of different things to be looking forward to. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up today that is going to be able to give the person watching or listening, again, that head start to where they need to be later on in the future so they don't get left behind? I know we kind of hit on that a few different times that, this is where we're going. This is what you could do right now to make sure that you're ahead of the curve in the future.
Yeah. So I usually tell developers to start looking into Move smart contract language, and then kind of get familiarized with that, and then use our blockchain to test it out. And I think biggest thing is not to be afraid. Honestly, like a lot of times people think it's complex. When they hear it, they just say, "Oh, it's too complex." It's actually a very simple to use blockchain. Building a blockchain is hard. Like, what we're doing is hard, but using it is super easy. And it's very open space, and there's a lot of information now. So I think it's a very good time to start. And Move ecosystem is growing a lot this year especially, and a lot of new features are coming, and we're going to be incorporating those features. I think this is the best year to kind of start building in Move ecosystem.
And if you want to have your one-stop shop where you can continue learning about this technology, blockchain, and of course just what it takes to have the grit to take on a project like this, you want to make sure that you stay tuned into the Genesis podcast. We will see you next time right here on the podcast, and I can only imagine what we're going to learn next time around.
Yeah, we're gonna go deeper. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, we're gonna learn a lot in this episode.
And thank you for watching or listening. We'll be sure to put all those links that we mentioned down in the show notes below. Take care. Until next time, this is the Genesis podcast.
Yeah, see ya.
How do you feel about